Every single morning, before the world woke up, one man kept a promise no one asked him to keep. He had lost his job, but the old man behind this door never knew.
Every piece of wood has a story to tell. I'm just here to help it speak.
Had no idea whose door he knocked on every single day. One ordinary knock was about to change everything he thought he knew. Because
if you've ever believed that kindness quietly given in the dark eventually finds its way back into the light, stay with this story until the very end. And if it moves you even a little, hit like and subscribe, because stories like this deserve to be shared with more people who still believe in doing good without expecting anything back. Daniel Reyes had learned to wake up before his alarm even rang. It wasn't discipline that pulled him out of bed at 5:30 every morning. It was worry. Worry about his 7-year-old daughter Lily, who needed her lunch packed before school. Worry about the rent that was due in 11 days. And worry, quiet and constant, about Mr. Arthur Whitmore, the 80-year-old widower who lived 2 houses down and hadn't had a single visitor in over a year besides him. 3 weeks earlier, Daniel had been let go from his job as a logistics coordinator at Calder Freight Solutions, a mid-sized shipping company that had just been acquired by a larger corporation. The transition brought a new CEO, a woman named Vivian Whitmore Cole, who arrived with spreadsheets, restructuring plans, and a reputation for making hard decisions without flinching. Daniel's entire department was dissolved in a single afternoon. He was handed a severance envelope, a cardboard box for his desk items, and a 2-minute meeting that ended his 8 years with the company. He hadn't told anyone yet. Not Lily, who still thought Daddy simply worked from home some days now, not his sister in Ohio, who already worried too much about him raising Lily alone since her mother passed away from an illness 3 years prior. And certainly not Mr. Whitmore, who greeted him every single morning with the same shaky, grateful smile, unaware that the man bringing him groceries and medicine was doing so with dwindling savings and a resume he'd sent out 43 times without a single callback. It had started almost 2 years ago, back when Daniel still had his job. He'd noticed Mr. Whitmore struggling to carry his mail up the porch steps one rainy afternoon and offered to help. That single afternoon turned into a habit, and the habit turned into a promise Daniel made to himself, that no matter what happened in his own life, he would never let the old man feel forgotten. Mr. Whitmore had no children who visited, no family photographs that were recent, only old ones yellowed with time, of a little girl with pigtails standing beside a much younger version of himself. Every morning, rain or shine, Daniel walked to Mr. Whitmore's porch with a bag of groceries, sometimes prescriptions from the pharmacy, sometimes just company and conversation. He helped him with crossword puzzles. He fixed the loose porch railing. He mowed the small patch of lawn out front, even when his own yard grew wild with neglect. In return, Mr. Whitmore offered him black coffee, stories about his years working as an engineer, and an unspoken kind of companionship that Daniel didn't realize he needed until he had it. Lily adored Mr. Whitmore too. On weekends, she would sit at his kitchen table coloring pictures of flowers while the old man told her about the garden he used to keep before his knees gave out. "You've got a good father," he told her once, patting her small hand. "Better than most men I've known in my whole life." Lily had beamed, and Daniel, standing in the doorway, had felt something in his chest tighten, pride, exhaustion, and fear all tangled together. Because the truth was, Daniel was drowning. His severance money was almost gone. He'd applied to jobs in warehousing, driving, retail management, anything that would let him support Lily and keep a roof over their heads. Every rejection email felt like another brick added to a wall he couldn't climb over. He'd started skipping his own meals some days to make sure Lily never noticed anything was wrong, and to make sure there was still enough left over for Mr. Whitmore's medication, which Daniel had quietly begun covering out of pocket when the old man's insurance stopped fully covering one of his prescriptions. Meanwhile, across town, Vivian Whitmore Cole sat in her glass-walled office overlooking the city, staring at spreadsheets that no longer felt like victories. She had built her reputation on efficiency, on making the numbers work no matter the emotional cost. The restructuring at Calder Freight had boosted quarterly profits, and the board was pleased. But something about signing that stack of termination letters 3 weeks ago had sat uneasily with her, particularly one name she vaguely remembered from a performance review that praised his reliability and quiet dedication: Daniel Reyes. Vivian's personal life, however, was far messier than her professional one. She hadn't spoken to her father in almost 4 years. Old wounds, old arguments about her choices, about the company she inherited a stake in and transformed into something colder and more corporate than the family business he had once run with warmth. Her father, Arthur Whitmore, had once told her that a company built on people's backs without caring about those people wasn't a company worth being proud of. She had walked out of that conversation and never looked back, convincing herself that ambition and sentiment could not coexist. It was a phone call from a hospital billing department, a routine automated notice about an overdue payment reminder for an Arthur Whitmore, that finally cracked something open in her. She hadn't even realized her father's address had changed until she looked it up, hadn't realized how long it had truly been since she'd checked on him. Guilt, sharp and sudden, sent her driving across town on a rainy Thursday evening, unannounced, unsure of what she would even say when she arrived. Daniel, of course, had no idea any of this was happening. That same evening, he walked up the familiar porch steps with a grocery bag in one hand and an umbrella in the other, humming a tune to keep his nerves steady after yet another rejection email that afternoon. He knocked twice, the same rhythm he always used, so Mr. Whitmore would know it was him and not worry about opening the door to a stranger. But the door that opened wasn't the frail, familiar shape of Mr. Whitmore leaning on his cane. It was a woman in a charcoal gray coat, sharp, dark bob haircut, standing rigid in the doorway with an expression somewhere between confusion and suspicion. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Daniel recognized her instantly. He'd seen her face on the company's internal announcement email the day she was introduced as the new CEO, and again in the brief, cold meeting where she sat silently while HR handed him his box of belongings. "Can I help you?" Vivian asked, her voice controlled, though her eyes flicked to the grocery bag in his hand with visible confusion. Daniel's mind raced. Explaining himself felt impossible, and yet standing there in silence felt even worse. "I'm a friend of Arthur's," he finally said. "I bring him groceries most mornings. I didn't realize he had family visiting." Vivian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "He's my father," she said, the words feeling foreign in her own mouth after so long. "I didn't realize he had any friends left who actually came around." There was a pause thick with unspoken things. Behind her, faintly, Mr. Whitmore's voice called out, asking who was at the door, and when he shuffled into view and saw Daniel standing there, his face lit up with the same warmth it always did. "Daniel! Come in, don't just stand there in the rain." Then his eyes landed on his daughter, and his expression shifted into something fragile, something hopeful and afraid at once. "Vivian," he said quietly, "you came." The tension in that doorway could have filled the entire street. Vivian stepped aside to let Daniel in, though her eyes stayed fixed on him with a mixture of recognition and disbelief, clearly piecing something together. Inside, over tea that Daniel insisted on making so father and daughter could have a moment, the truth slowly untangled itself. Mr. Whitmore spoke about how Daniel had shown up nearly every day for 2 years, through sickness, through storms, through the quiet loneliness that had settled into the house since his wife passed. He spoke about how Daniel refused payment, how he'd once caught him slipping his own grocery money into paying for a prescription refill without ever mentioning it. Vivian sat frozen, absorbing every word, watching this stranger, a man she had unknowingly fired 3 weeks earlier, reveal a character far deeper and more selfless than any performance review could capture. When Mr. Whitmore mentioned, almost in passing, that Daniel had been unusually quiet and tired lately, worried but unwilling to burden him with his own troubles, Vivian felt something crack open inside her chest. She excused herself briefly to the kitchen, gripping the counter, forcing back an unexpected wave of emotion she hadn't anticipated. When she returned, she asked Daniel directly, gently, "Why didn't you tell him you lost your job?" Daniel looked down at his hands. "Because he's dealt with enough loss in his life. I wasn't going to let him carry mine, too." The room fell silent, and for the first time in years, Vivian looked at her father not as an obligation she'd been avoiding, but as a man who had somehow, without her, found someone who treated him with the same quiet devotion she used to believe families were supposed to have. Over the following days, everything began to shift. Vivian returned to see her father not out of guilt, but out of a genuine desire to rebuild what she'd let wither. She and Daniel spoke more, awkwardly at first, both still aware of the strange circumstance that connected them. Eventually, she asked him to come into her office, not for another termination, but for a conversation about reinstating his position, this time with a promotion overseeing employee welfare programs. An idea, she said, had been forming in her mind since the night she watched her father's face light up over a simple cup of tea. Daniel was hesitant. Pride and independence had carried him through hardship before, and charity, even disguised as opportunity, felt uncomfortable. But Vivian made it clear this wasn't charity. "You've been managing people's needs better than half my management team," she told him honestly. "I'd be a fool not to want that on my team." Daniel accepted, not because it solved his financial worries, though it certainly did, but because for the first time in weeks, he felt seen for who he truly was, rather than a name on a layoff list. Life slowly stitched itself back together. Lily continued her weekend visits to Mr. Whitmore's kitchen table, now sometimes joined by Vivian, who arrived not in her sharp business suits but in soft sweaters, sitting beside her father as he told stories neither of them had shared with each other in years. The porch that Daniel once visited quietly and unnoticed became a place where 3 generations gathered, an old man rediscovering his daughter, a single father finding stability again, and a little girl who never stopped believing her father was the kindest man she knew. Months later, at a small gathering in Mr. Whitmore's backyard garden, now tended again with fresh soil and blooming flowers, Vivian raised a glass and said something she never thought she'd say aloud. "My father always told me that a life built without kindness isn't a life worth being proud of. I spent years thinking that was old-fashioned thinking. It took a stranger showing up at his door every single day to remind me he was right all along." Daniel, standing nearby with Lily's small hand in his, simply smiled, the kind of smile that didn't need recognition to feel complete. He hadn't helped Mr. Whitmore for reward, and he never expected the door to be opened one day by the very person who once let him go. But sometimes, the quietest acts of kindness find their way back to us in the most unexpected forms, opening doors we never knew were waiting to be opened. And sometimes, doing the right thing simply because it's right ends up being the very thing that saves us in return.